When I was a teenager, a friend of mine gave me a rabbit's foot, and I don't know that I really knew the lore behind the rabbit's foot talisman at the time, but it was explained to me that if you carry it around with you, and then if you need luck, you just you rub the rabbit's foot, and good things will come your way. And I didn't really believe in the power of the rabbit's foot. For one thing, from a logical point of view, a rabbit had that at some time, and now he didn't. So, there's some serious, flaw in the logic. Not sure exactly why anybody would put any faith in that, but I did kind of have that. Well, but what harm could be done by just carrying it around with me? And if I need a little extra, bump, I can, rub the rabbit's foot. So I don't know what happened to the rabbit's foot. A rabbit may have gotten it back. I don't know. And I wouldn't call myself a superstitious person, but I've encountered some things. Like I pulled the four-wheeler into the garage the other day, and I ran into the big mirror that was supposed to sit on one of our dressers, and broke it. And apparently that's a deal where 7 years, bad luck. And to this day, I won't walk under a ladder, if I can avoid it. And I think a lot of people treat Christianity that way, in that I'm not sure exactly how much we believe in the whole thing, but it doesn't do any harm to go and sing a few songs and pray a prayer or two, and maybe there's something there. And I'm certain that I'm probably not talking to that group this morning, but one of the things that the Gospel of John does, more so than other Gospels, I'm not saying that the other Gospels don't do it, I'm just saying that the way that John presents the good news, and I want to underline that word, that it is good news, the way that John presents the good news of Jesus Christ, he does so in a way that cures the rabbit's foot religion problem. He doesn't leave any wiggle room, and I'll unpack that here in just a few minutes. But for those that are visiting, one of the themes often that comes out of this pulpit is the idea of Zoe, which is a Greek word that gets translated into our Bible as life. And it's a very confusing thing, in that the Greek has three different words for our one word life. And so anytime you see life in the Bible, there is the potential that it's the word Zoe, or it could be bios, or it could be suke. And you don't have to know any of that to go to heaven. But what you do need to understand is that 99% of the time when Jesus, in fact, probably 100%, though I haven't checked this out, but any time that Jesus uses the term life, and it's translated life in your Bible, that is the word Zoe, and it doesn't mean that biologically you're still kicking. It means that you are experiencing the ultimate in human experience. That you're thriving, that you're getting, this is the term that I use with my kids, that you're getting everything there is to get out of life. Okay? So when Jesus says in John chapter 10, I came that they may have, he says the thief I love this. The thief comes to steal and to kill, but I came so that they may have life and have it abundantly. So Jesus says, my goal, my purpose for you is for you to get everything there is to get out of being human. And so we're gonna spend a little bit of time looking at the concept of life. But for a moment, I just want to talk about the fact that Satan's favorite color is gray. He's always looking at pushing us away from the pole and toward the center. And I don't know, are you guys familiar with the idea that our faith is under attack? Does that escape your? I mean, I don't want to shock you, but I do want you to be fully informed. So if it hadn't washed across your consciousness, our faith is under attack, and one of the things that is consistently used to club us is the exclusivity of the gospel narrative. And so we find ourselves consistently feeling the need to apologize. And I see some of you shaking your heads. There is this temptation, maybe I should say, whether you feel the need to do so or not, there's this temptation to apologize for the exclusivity of the gospel message. And I think that there's a lot of us in church circles who, are wanting to fit in to our culture. We don't want to ruffle feathers. But how do you do that and still hold true to the gospel narrative? And I'm going to tell you, it can't be done. That's the downside of this sermon. And Jesus knew that, right? I mean, he knew that to be friends with him, he knew that to side with him was going to mean that you were going to pick a fight with your culture. And he says that all over the place, but in several places in the Gospel of John. We have this pressure to not carry, our religiosity, if that's a word, not carry it to an extreme. And in fact, in our culture, it has become a real slanderous thing for you to be an extremist, right? I mean, now it's okay, like, I've got a couple of people that I work with who, they will, I'll start to say they will hurt you, but they will come close to hurting you if you badmouth the Minnesota Vikings.
Oh.
Right? I mean, it's a big deal, and they don't seem like they're kidding. Maybe they are, but they just seem like, okay, I'll just, I won't say anything about the Vikings. Sorry, It's okay to be a fanatic. It's okay to be an extremist in our culture when you're talking about a football team, perhaps. But when you start talking about religion, then religious extremists, that's a bad deal. So we don't want to, whatever we do, we don't want to do that. So we're looking for a way, I say we generically, Christianity. Maybe I should just do it that way. Christianity, generically, in the United States, is looking, desperately searching for a way to work out a peace treaty. They're looking, for some way to kind of compromise with the world spirit, as Paul would call it in Ephesians chapter 1. And then you add on top of that the failure of the church on occasion to live up to what it teaches, and the legalism and the meanness. And the end result, and I want to underscore this, the end result is an a la carte approach to faith where we check the price and the prevailing wins before we put our weight down on it. Right? So, while there's all, for instance, I can have a religious conversation with anybody on the street without it being nasty, as long as I, do something like do unto others as you would have others do unto you. Now that came right from Jesus, and if I were to start a conversation with just somebody on the street and they say, "Are you a Christian?" and yeah, absolutely, and here's the deal. Jesus taught us to do unto others as we'd have them do unto us. Nobody's going to argue with that, right? So as you're going through the a la carte, kind of looking through the menu, that one doesn't cost very much, because in our culture, that's okay. We can live with that. The idea that Jesus, for instance, taught regularly. I have yet to find somebody who would argue with me when I make the statement that Jesus consistently pointed to sin as the human problem, the apex of the human problem, right? So, and he would go so far as to say you have to crucify self and get rid of that selfishness thing. Nobody's going to argue with that. I've had conversations with people who have absolutely no faith in Jesus whatsoever, and when I talk about the selfishness thing, they nod their head up and down. Because they're in agreement with that. And we've got coffee cups and bumper stickers with "I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me," and that's really not all that confrontational. It's Peter standing around that fire pod in the room where Jesus is on trial. And just a few hours earlier, he says, he snapped a Z and says, right? "I am ready to go." You guys didn't know the Greek said that Peter snapped a Z and said, he said, "I am ready to go even to the grave for you." And just a few hours later, a little girl comes up to him and says, "I recognize," John Dennis's paraphrase, but comes up to him, finger in his face, and says, "I recognize your dialect. You're one of those Galileans." And Peter says, "By the God of heaven," or something like, "I don't know what you're talking about." As the pastor of the largest megachurch in the United States a few years ago, being grilled by Larry King. I almost put this video clip in this sermon, but I decided not to, for one reason, because it would have been difficult for the editor to figure out how to put that on the web. Being grilled by Larry King, and Larry King puts a finger in his face and asks him about other religious groups and their access to God. And he stammers and stutters and flounces around on that stage for probably 4 or 5 minutes, desperately looking for some way to hold on to Jesus and hold on to popularity with the culture. And he just looked like such a fool. Here's the deal. You're going to have to weigh the evidence, and you're going to have to draw a conclusion, and you're going to have to stand on it. One way or the other. And don't... I'm going to tell you this, and it's not going to sound like anything you've ever heard from a preacher before. But I'm going to tell you, you weigh the evidence, and if you cannot come down on the side of, I can put my full weight down on this Jesus, then drop it and let it go. Just go. Let it go. And I'm not being mean. I'm just saying that you are going to be miserable trying to hold on to mutually exclusive worlds. They're moving in opposite directions. And if you're trying to hold on to, the a la carte Jesus, I like this thing of Jesus and I like this of Jesus, but some of this other stuff is really kind of controversial, so I'm just going to kind of try to, ride the fence. I'm telling you, you're just going to be miserable. So, and by the way, what I'm telling you here is not something that I made up. This is something that Jesus is going to do on almost every page in the Gospel of John. Well, that's probably an exaggeration. But he is going to consistently do this in the Gospel of John, where he says, here is my statement. Now, and you say, wow, that is intense. And it is intense. And Jesus, especially as he is presented to us by John, he intends for it to be intense and to be radical and extreme. All right. So one of the things I like about John when he writes is he somewhere in his writings, either in the Gospel of John or in his letters, he'll say, "Oh, and by the way, here's why I'm writing this." That's always good. At work, some of us have this thing where we just say in our emails. I don't know if you guys are familiar with people who send you like a 45-page email and you're just desperately looking for what is the point here, So some of us will just put at the very top, bottom line, here's the deal, and then you put your 45 pages, but then typically people aren't really interested in reading through all of that. They just want to know what the bottom line is. So John says, interestingly, at the end of the book, though, so he makes you read all the way to the end before he says, oh, here's the bottom line. But here, John chapter 20, verse 30 and 31, and this is so good. He says, Jesus performed many other signs in the presence of his disciples, which are not recorded in this book. Well, first of all, you want to say, what? Dude, why did you write them down? Was there a page limit or what? I mean, what were you dealing with here? Not recorded. I would love to have had those, but anyway, they're not written in this book. But these are written. I love this. Now watch what he does here. You'll just burn right past this if you don't really stop and listen to what he says. He says, "But these are written that you may believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life." Now here's the thing. He doesn't say, and I love this, he doesn't say, and if you don't believe, you're going to go to the bad place. Or, that's That's not the point. The point is that life is being offered. That the idea that you could live in such a way that you would get everything that God intended for you to get out of life. That's the offer on the table. And you say, well, but I'm doing okay without that. Peace. Okay. If you're doing okay without it, but I'm going to tell you that there's this idea, and I've used this illustration before, but I got to use it again. My son Caleb, who has always been into video games as far back as I can remember, the kid could run a mouse at like 2. That's not a preacher story. I'm being honest. So, but by the time he was like 4 or 5, we'd go to Pizza Hut, and and as soon as we get finished eating, or he'd get finished cramming the pizza down, he'd jump up and he wanted to go play the video games, and so he's playing whatever they were, Star Wars shoot 'em up stuff, and he's punching buttons, and there's lights and explosions, and he's just having such a great time, and then some guy walked up one day and said to Caleb, "Hey, you want a quarter?" And he put a quarter in the slot, and all of a sudden it's like, wow! I mean, Caleb thought he was getting everything there was to get at a video game, and then some knucklehead came up and put a quarter in the slot, right? So here's the deal. And then after that, it was like, Dad could have a quarter, Dad could have a quarter, right? Yeah. So here's the thing. You say, well, I'm doing fine without this, Jesus. And I'm saying, you have no idea. Nobody's put a quarter in the slot. So there's that. But if we look at this and say, okay, so there's life that's on the table. He's saying, here, I'm offering you life. Not that you may be able to continue bios, living biologically, but that you will thrive. I'm offering you life. But to get there, you're going to have to believe. And this word believe has got so many meanings in our culture that it's almost worthless here. That you may believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and that believing you may have life in His name. So this is not, I don't even know where I'm at in my notes. That's a bad deal. Trains jump the track. This is not an intellectual thing, right? This is not that, I've done the math and I believe that there was a Jesus. I don't know anybody, atheist or not, who would say that I don't believe that Jesus lived, right? I mean, so, in some sense of the term, there's a mental assent that says, for everybody on the planet. Well, I agree, there was a Jesus, so I guess I'm in. But that's not the word that's being used here. We use the word believe in so many ways. A person that I mentor at work was getting ready to apply for a new position, and I sent them a message and just said, I believe in you. And does that imply that I wasn't sure that they existed before, but now I've come to the point where I believe that they exist? No, it means that I am confident in their ability, right? But this word believe here doesn't have anything to do with confidence. I'm going to underscore that again, and I got a lot of ground to cover here. It's not about confidence. It's about, regardless of your confidence, being able to put your full weight down on this thing, whatever it is. And I don't know, I heard this some time ago, I don't have any secondary corroboration on it, but it makes a great illustration, so I'm going to use it, and then if somebody has some corroborating facts on it, I'd sure be interested in knowing. But the Wycliffe Bible translators, when they got to this one little tribe in Africa, and I can't now recall which one it was, but they were working on translating the scriptures. What a fabulous ministry, right? They were working on translating the scriptures, and they came up with a rather unique problem in that this tribe didn't have a word in their native language for this idea of belief, the biblical concept of belief. But they did have a word that described a bridge that you could walk across and know that you weren't going to fall to your death. You could put your weight down on that bridge. And so the Wycliffe Bible translators used that word in the place of what we would see as the word believe. That you can put your full weight down on it and know that it's not going to buckle under your weight, right? So John, to sum up, John says, I wrote this down so that you can put your full weight down on Jesus and His Messiahship, and in doing so, get the most humanly possible out of life. That's good stuff. I know. My kids aren't here to make fun of me, so I'll... John chapter 14. I want you to just grab your Bibles and... The event that I was telling you about with the pastor and Larry King, some lady calls into the Larry King show and quotes this passage of Scripture. I love it. Don't let your hearts be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. My Father's house has many mansions. If that were not so, I would have told you. I've got ahead of myself. This NIV doesn't read like it's supposed to. What I have told you, that I am going to prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come back and take you to be with me, that you also may be where I am. You know the way. You know the way to the place where I'm going. And don't you love Thomas, who is so honest, right? I mean, he has the moniker in religious circles as being what? Doubting Thomas, right? He's not doubting Thomas. He's just honest Thomas. He just has the courage to say, you know, the rest of these guys are nodding their head like they know what you're talking about, Jesus, but I don't have a clue. What are you talking about? He says, Lord, we don't know where you're going. So how do we know the way? And Jesus answers. It would be so convenient to the Christian faith and our goal to fit in with our culture if Jesus had not said the thing that next comes out of his mouth. I am the way. The hodos. We get our word method from that word. I am the way and the truth, aletheia. It doesn't mean truth doctrinal. It means truth as opposed to being deluded or deceived. It's on the opposite end of the spectrum from deception. So he says, he doesn't say, come to me and I will give you the way. He doesn't say, come to me and I will give you the truth as opposed to deception. He says, I am the, not one of the, I am the, Hodos, the Aletheia. And the, what? Zoe. Exactly. Wow. No one comes to the Father except through me. Well then, what are we going to do with that? If you're going to be His disciple, you're going to have to embrace this thing that comes with Jesus. It's not an a la carte thing. It's not, I'll take some of this and some of this. It's either, and He didn't intend for you to do that. He intended to completely eliminate the a la carte. It's either this or it's this. But you're not ever, you know, the whole thing about trying to be a wolfish sheep or a sheepish wolf, neither one of those is going to work. If you're going to be a wolf, be a wolf. If you're going to be a sheep, for God's sake, people, just be a sheep. But trying to find some way to hybridize, is that a word, hybridize? Trying to find some middle ground between being a disciple of Jesus and living in the world is just, it's just not a goal that is tenable. It's just not going to work for you. Things. Rich young ruler, Richie Rich, you guys remember that? Poor little rich guy. He comes to Jesus, pulls up in his Maserati chariot, and you know, he's got a lot of power and authority, and he's used to people bowing down and kind of bowing and scraping, and he comes to Jesus with this, you know, this question: what do I need to do in order to inherit eternal life? And you guys know, you know, Jesus says, well, you know, keep the law. You know, don't commit adultery, don't steal, don't kill, honor your father and mother. And the guy says, well, I've done that since I was a kid. And Jesus says, one thing you lack. And you know this guy's going, tell me what it is. And Jesus says, abandon your wealth. Come be one of my apostles. I think that's what Jesus was doing there. You read that and you can decide for yourself. But go sell everything you've got and come follow me. That's what he was asking of his, you know, of his 12 or, you know, his closest guys. He says, well, you know, you're almost there. Just go sell what you got and come follow me. And it says that the guy's countenance fell. What does that mean when somebody's countenance falls? There you go. Some of you did it. Yeah, just like. It would be like me saying, I've got 2 more slides. Right? His countenance fell, and he said, he turned and walked away because he had much wealth. And I love this. And Jesus didn't chase him. He just said, peace. And I mean, I like to write my end of that story. I like to think that in the end he came back and became a disciple of Jesus. Read John 6, last one. Read John 6. Feeds this massive bunch of people with few loaves and fishes. And then later they're following along and wanting him to, you know, perform another magic trick. And Jesus says, hey, I'm going to give you a sermon first. You have to eat my flesh and drink my blood if you're going to be my disciples. And it says, and they were offended. And a bunch of them turned and walked with him no more. And he didn't chase them. And In fact, he turned to the 12. I love this. He turns to the 12 and says, you want to go too? And Peter, I mean, he was a knucklehead, but sometimes he was on, right? Peter says to Jesus, well, where would we go? You have the words of life.